For Sinister road trip horror tales that expose terrifying secrets of haunted highways, the sun dipped low behind endless cornfields as Mark Peterson revved the family's battered SUV, excitement buzzing in the air. Ready to escape? He called back to his wife, Ellen, and their two teenagers, Jake and Lily. With laughter and anticipation, they piled and packed bags brimming with snacks and playlists intended to drown out the drudgery of their daily lives. But they had no idea that this trip would pull them into a nightmarish landscape etched in fear as they drove deeper into rural Indiana. The smooth asphalt morphed into cracked, barely their pathways flanked by twisted trees that clawed at the sky. The laughter dwindled as a chilling silence embraced them, broken only by the eerie rustle of leaves in the autumn wind. Expecting typical highway banter, Jake and Lily exchanged uneasy glances, but the thrill of the unknown quickened their pulse. At a half-abandoned gas station, an elderly man with hands forever stained by oil and stories leaned toward them. "Gotta watch out for the ghosts of Route 66. He chuckled, but it sounded like a warning. Ellen felt a chill slide down her spine as they gasped at the tales of families that vanished without a trace. An electric anxiety stressed the air, tightening around their hearts. She reluctantly laughed it off. Wasn't it just another tale to trap them in the mundane? With every mile, the atmosphere thickened, vibrant colors drained from the scenery. An old diner emerged like a mirage, its flickering neon lights barely cutting through the darkening night. The waitress greeted them with a smile that didn't quite meet her eyes. Her earnest yet unsettling tales of a family lost to the highway made laughter feel hollow. The food barely hit their guts, and they exchanged haunted glances as her gaze fixated on the family picture on the table, a sense of urgency pressing down on them. "You should leave before dark," she whispered, her words hanging in the air like poison. Night enveloped them. The SUV raced deeper into the unknown, headlights slicing through thickening fog that clung with ghostly fingers. An unsettling wind howled, kick-starting the old radio into wild static, distorted voices warning them of the two-faced locals. Heart rates spiked, and dread knotted in their stomachs. Was it just a broken radio? Suddenly, Marcus' eyelids felt as heavy as lead. The kids were transfixed on their screens, oblivious to the shadows dancing just outside of sight, figures that seemed to beckon them deeper into the veil of darkness. Ellen's pulse raced, adrenaline coursing through, as they passed a crumbling motel, its ghostly silhouette looming like a predator. Whispers lured them as they passed signs strewn like lost memories, foreboding tales of horror left unsaid. Without warning, a deer leapt onto the road. Mark slammed the brakes, heart hammering as they skidded to a halt. The world lurched in a surreal moment of silence, all breath caught in their chests until a scratching sound erupted from the roof. Panic surged. "What was that?" Jake yelled, wide-eyed. A shadow flickered in the rearview mirror and the reality settled in a nightmare they never sought had taken root. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The figure loomed larger, its face shrouded in darkness. Adrenaline shot through Mark as dread washed over them. They were no longer just a family on an adventure. They were prey, caught in a sinister web spun by haunted highways. Each heart-pounding moment sent them racing into the desolate void, vying against secrets etched in asphalt. Would they escape this malevolence, or would they become fodder for yet another tale whispered in the wind? Mark's breaths came heavy and fast, jagged, sweat trickling down his spine. A series of frenzied thuds rang like a death knell on the roof of their SUV. Each sound sent a fresh ripple of terror through the car. "What the hell is up there?" Ellen gasped, heart racing. Just a deer," Mark stammered, trying to quell the growing panic in their eyes. Yet, he felt the cold tendrils of fear squeezing at his throat, the truth whispering in his ear. There was something out there that wasn't natural. Jake leaned forward, all bravado stripped away. We should get out. What if it's stuck? No. Ellen snapped, glancing at the thickening fog pressing against the glass, swallowing everything beyond their headlights. We need to stay inside. We don't know what's out there. Mark gripped the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. The unsettling scratching continued, almost rhythmic, as if something or someone was testing their patience. It felt like a countdown, one they might not escape. Just then, an unnaturally long shadow bobbed behind the SUV, twisting and bending as if it had a life of its own. Mark's eyes shot to the rearview mirror again. Nothing. He forced himself to breathe, mentally shaking the image away. Was his mind playing tricks? Suddenly, the scratching stopped. Silence draped over them like a heavy blanket, sinking into their skin. What just happened? Lily murmured, voice trembling. Mark looked back. Maybe it left, he said, his voice cracking. But as if the world wanted to retort, both headlights flickered and died. Darkness engulfed them. Mark, Ellen whispered, her voice barely audible. Turn them back on. I can't. The car's dead. Panic ignited in his chest, and he began to pound the steering wheel, a desperate plea. They couldn't sit blind in the dark. Jake and Lily's faces reflected raw fear. I'm scared, Jake wailed, clutching Lily's arm. Mark's breath was ragged, heart hammering against his ribs. He fumbled for his phone. We can use the flashlight. But before he switched it on, a loud bang echoed around them, and the SUV trembled violently. They all gasped and pressed against one another, hearts racing as they scanned the gloom. Someone's trying to get in, Lily shrieked. Fumbling fingers clutched her seatbelt as tears streaked down her cheeks. A second loud thud sounded this time on the driver's side. Mark, we need to go. Ellen's voice was rising now, panic clawing at her throat. I can't see, he shouted, fear contorting his features. Then they saw it. A figure materialized on the driver's side, eyes gleaming with sinister intent. A face, twisted and grotesque, stared back at them through the window, trying to peer inside. Mark's heart dropped. Stay back, he yelled, though his voice trembled with terror. The figure reached toward the window, a hand that seemed to distort as it moved, an unnatural elongation creeping closer. Ellen screamed, slapping at the window. Get away. The creature let out a horrible laugh, a sound that sent shards of ice straight into Mark's veins. It leaned closer, pressing its face against the glass, its eyes hungry and dark. In a flash, the lights flickered back on, revealing the nightmare lurking outside. Mark's foot slammed on the accelerator without hesitation. The engine responded with a sputter, a desperate urging for life. He didn't wait for a second thought. He threw the SUV into gear, tires screeching against the gravel. They lurched forward, barely escaping the embrace of death as Mark fought to keep the vehicle straight on the dim and forsaken road. But a movement in the rearview mirror caught his eye. There it was again. That same sinister figure, now sprinting after them with unholy speed. What was that? Jake gasped, breathless. But Mark couldn't answer, fear locking his throat tight. He focused ahead, the road narrow and treacherous. But just as he believed they were free, the asphalt beneath them shifted, revealing an old dirt path leading into the dense woods. The clouds overhead churned, swirling ominously. Mark, where are you going? Ellen snapped, gripping the dashboard. You have to stay on the road. Follow the asphalt, he barely choked out, but the pressure of their pursuer weighed heavily on him. What lay ahead in the woods he dared not imagine. Mark, they yelled in unison as he veered onto the path, shadows dancing all around them, and hope faded like their headlights. Would they emerge alive, or would the woods consume them whole? In that moment of uncertain fate, Mark could only grip the wheel and drive deeper into chaos. The trees pressed in on all sides, their tall, gnarled trunks like fingers reaching for the sky. Mark swerved the SUV around a bend, branches scratching at the windows as if trying to drag them back. The darkness thickened, almost tangible now, deep and suffocating. It swallowed their tiny vehicle whole. Do you think it's still following us? Jake whimpered, his voice barely cutting through the heavy silence. The dim light from the flashlight flickered, mirroring his fear. I don't know, Mark shouted back, eyes darting nervously to the rearview mirror. Just keep quiet. They drove deeper into the woods, the gravel crunching under the tires like bones snapping beneath monstrous feet. But there was no human sound accompanying them, just an oppressive, crushing quiet that made Mark's pulse race. Was something waiting for them in the shadows? Mark, stop. Ellen's voice bristled with urgency. We can't keep going like this. We'll get lost. He wanted to argue, to tell her that stopping might mean letting whatever was chasing them catch up. But panic had turned his tongue to lead. We need to find somewhere to hide. You have to slow down, Lily added, her hands gripping the headrest in front of her. They could feel the tension rising with every passing second, like a taut string threatening to snap. Just then, a sound erupted from the woods, a low, growling growl that reverberated through the air. It lingered, almost mocking in its resonance. Mark's grip on the wheel tightened, his breath catching in his throat. Did you hear that? He asked, barely above a whisper. All four of them froze. They strained to listen. The growl morphed into a series of unearthly howls, echoing through the trees, chilling their blood. It was closer now, circling them. Go faster, Jake shouted, his voice trembling. Mark slammed down the accelerator, kicking up dust as the SUV shot forward. But there was nowhere left to go, just a narrowing pathway ahead where the trees stood more densely packed than before. Suddenly, the SUV lurched violently, the sound of crunching metal filling the air as they collided with something in the road. Shouts erupted in the car, but Mark had no time to process. The creature was close, he could feel its breath hot on the back of his neck. Get out! Get out! Ellen screamed, staring wide-eyed at the rear window. It's here. Mark's heart pounded in time with the growls growing louder behind them. They were trapped in a nightmare of their own making. He turned the wheel sharply, moments away from losing control, desperation coursing through his veins. What do we do? Jake cried, panic exploding in his voice. Mark's mind raced. He glanced at the passenger seat, seeing Ellen rummaging through her bag. What do you have? Nothing but the flare, Ellen yelled, pulling it out quickly. But before she could ask if it could even work, the howl erupted again, closer and more furious than before. Mark's hands shook as he focused ahead. We'll take a chance. If we can scare it away, but would it even listen? He could already feel the presence moving closer, something malevolent bursting forth from the shadows. Now! Light it now! Lily urged. Every second felt like an eternity, fear painted on her face. Ellen struck the flare, the bright light twisting and climbing into the dark canopy above. They all squinted against the emergency brightness. The silhouette of the horror emerged momentarily, its hideous visage flickering into view. What should have been a temporary relief turned to dread as the creature lunged out of the shadows. A mass of twisted limbs and feral eyes, teeth bared like sharpened knives. Mark screamed as the flare flickered, threatening to go out. They were no longer hiding in the woods. They were the prey. Drive, Mark! Drive! With adrenaline surging, Mark surged forward, not knowing if they would escape with their lives, or if they would simply become part of the darkness themselves. The creature was gaining on them, shadows reaching through the gaps in the SUV's frame. But just as hope began to dim, he saw it, an abandoned cabin flickering. In the distance, its windows cracked but intact, a semblance of safety. Could they make it? Or was that only another trap designed to lure them into despair? Mark, hurry! It's right behind us. The creature's growls were now a deafening roar, and all Mark could think was that they needed to reach that cabin before it was too late. He didn't know if it was salvation or another nightmare, but the choice was clear. Fight or be consumed. As they tore towards the looming shadow of the cabin, the sound of breaking branches and snapping twigs filled the air. They were on the precipice of something unimaginable, and the darkness was creeping closer. Still, what terrors awaited inside those walls? Would they find refuge or something worse? The cabin loomed larger as they sped closer, its decaying wood and smudged windows promising safety but exuding a sinister allure. Mark's heart hammered against his ribs. The growls behind them were like thunder, dreadful and inevitable. With every thump, he felt the walls of the SUV closing in on him, suffocating him in impending doom. Just a little closer, he yelled, pushing the gas pedal down hard, the engine roaring in reply. But the cabin remained stubbornly distant, every inch feeling like a mile. "Mark," Ellen pleaded, her voice rising in pitch. "You need to." Before she could finish, a sickening thud echoed as something crashed into the rear of the SUV, the impact sending shocks through their bodies. The car swerved, tires screeching, and Mark fought wildly to regain control. "It's on us. It's right on us," Jake cried, terror lacing his words. The sharp smell of burning rubber filled the air, mingling grotesquely with impending dread. The porch of the cabin creaked ominously as if aware of the chaos outside. With one final push, the SUV barreled past the threshold, the tires kicking gravel across the warped floorboards. Mark yanked the wheel, spinning it into a sharp turn, flinging them into the driveway. "Get out! Out now!" They tumbled from the vehicle, limbs flailing as they hit the ground, scrambling toward the cabin. Mark stumbled to the front door, his fingers shaking violently as he fumbled for the handle. What was behind them? He couldn't dare look. He could feel it hot, hungry, and closing in. Ellen yanked the door open, and they surged inside, crashing into a musty hallway lined with old photographs. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting figures frozen in silent screams. Mark's breath hitched as he recognized one, an unsettling resemblance to Ellen. "No, no," she gasped, pulling back, eyes darting between the surroundings, horror clutching her throat. "Focus," Mark urged, eyes wide with panic. "We have to find a place to hide." They pushed deeper into the cabin, each creak beneath their feet seeming to echo their growing despair. The howls outside intensified, a haunting chorus that penetrated their thoughts, swirling around them like the fog visible through the cracks in the windows. "Shut the door," Lily urged, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "They can't follow us inside." Jake slammed the door shut, bolting it with shaking hands. But Mark knew it was just a temporary reprieve. They were still vulnerable, outnumbered by whatever hunted them. "Where do we go?" Lily whispered, her wide eyes hunting for any sign of safety. "Cellar," Mark said, his voice low and gravelly. "If there's anything down there, we can find some way to protect ourselves." They navigated through the dimly lit cabin, searching for the cellar door amidst the peeling wallpaper and dust-covered furniture. As they reached the kitchen, a low rumble vibrated through the floor as if something massive had collided just outside, not the creature, but something else. A whirlwind gust swept through the broken window, carrying whispers of voices lost in the forest. "Did you hear that?" Ellen asked, skin prickling. "Just a storm," Jake replied, though his voice wavered. Mark gripped the cellar door handle, a cold sweat pooling at the back of his neck. He hesitated just a moment. What awaited them below? Jake's eyes widened, and he pointed. "The light, it's flickering under the door." Mark swallowed hard, looking back at the others. Fear pooled in the pit of his stomach. He pushed the handle down, and the door creaked open, revealing the stairwell down into darkness, the faint light flickering like a dying heartbeat. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to flee the house and its creeping dread. But as the unmistakable sound of guttural growls echoed from outside the cabin, Mark stepped through the threshold into the unknown, what lay in the depths below, an escape or an even darker fate. The air was thick as Mark stepped into the cellar, a musty stench enveloping him like a weighted blanket. The light flickered weakly above, casting grotesque shadows on the uneven stone walls. Ellen followed, her breath hitching as she brushed past him, the chill of the dark room freezing her spine. "Stay close," Mark whispered, his voice barely louder than a breath. He could feel the tremors in his hands. The sounds outside had faded, swallowed by the thick walls of the cabin. But an eerie silence hung in the air, oppressive and foreboding. They descended into the gloom, one shaky step at a time, every creak echoing like a whisper of warning. The grip of fear gnawed at Mark's insides. He reached the bottom, squinting into the shadows, scanning for something, Anything. To defend against he didn't even know what a rickety table stood in the center of the room, covered in dust and cobwebs. On it lay old jars filled with murky liquid, an assortment of rusty tools, and a bottle labeled tincture of nightmares. Mark felt a surge of panic. What kind of madness dwelt in this wretched place? Is this place even safe? Jake asked, his voice a shaky whisper. What if whatever was outside was drawn in here? We can't go back out there. Ellen snapped, her voice rising. We need to find something. We have to. A deafening crash shattered the stillness, rattling the foundation of the cabin. It sent tremors coursing through them, their hearts racing in unison as they clung to the table. Had the beast made its way inside? Mark darted his gaze around the cellar, seeking exits, a hint of escape. Look for a weapon, he commanded, his own voice steadying him. We need something. They searched frantically, hands trembling as they rifled through the debris, finding nothing but more reminders of despair. Old tools with rusted handles, sealed boxes they dared not open. Each moment stretched out, the dread building, pulsating like a living thing. A beat later, Ellen froze. Mark, what's that? She pointed to a dark corner of the cellar that had been shrouded in shadows. Mark followed her gaze, heart thundering. There, nestled against the wall, was an old chest half buried under dirt and cobwebs. It looked as ancient as the cabin itself, the wood warped and splintered. Should we open it? Jake asked, voice trembling. No, Mark said, a wave of foreboding crashing over him. But curiosity sparked in his chest like a wildfire. What secrets were contained inside? Maybe it holds something to help us, Lily suggested against his better judgment. Mark approached the chest, pulling on the rusty latch. It clicked open with an alarming ease, sending a shudder through the group. They exchanged nervous glances, breath held in collective dread. He lifted the lid slowly, the creaking noise drowning out the remaining defense of silence. Inside lay old clothes, brittle and yellowing, alongside what looked like bones. A chill ran down his spine as he peered deeper, not daring to reach in. But the smell hit him first, sickly sweet, overwhelming. Clung to the air, suffocating. Mark recoiled, nausea pooling in his stomach. Then he heard it, a soft scuttling from the upper dark, like something or someone moving. Did you hear that? Ellen asked, her eyes wide. She gripped the side of the chest like a lifeline. Before anyone could reply, the flickering light above cut out completely. Darkness enveloped them, swallowing their gasps, plunging them into an abyss of terrifying unknown. Get ready, Mark shouted, adrenaline surging. We need to find a way out now. But as he turned, a shadow loomed at the edge of the cellar, inching closer, a low growl reverberating through the air like an echo of the threat outside. The darkness thickened, and whatever lurked beyond the veil seemed to whisper Mark's name, chilling him to the core. What awaited them in the suffocating blackness? Would they emerge intact, or would the past consume them whole? The darkness pressed heavily against Mark's skin as he demanded everyone stay silent. Shoo! He hissed, straining to hear beyond the unsettling growl. Sounds of scuttling echoed in the distance, mingling with the dread brewing in his gut. He held his breath, trying to separate the thumping of his heart from whatever awaited them in the darkness. Maybe it's just a rat, Jake's voice wavered, trying to inject false reassurance into the panic-filled air. But it fell flat. Not a rat, Ellen whispered back. Her voice trembled, each word punctuating the silence that enveloped them. Something is down here with us. Mark felt the weight of her fear. He stepped back, trying to keep his eyes on the corner where he'd seen the shadow. They had to move. They couldn't just stand there waiting to be hunted. Over here, Lily shouted, her voice slicing through the darkness. She pointed to a wall that seemed to shimmer even in the absence of light. It appeared to be a door, barely visible, more an outline against the rough stone. Are you crazy? Jake exclaimed. That could lead anywhere. Better than staying here. Mark ventured ahead. He opened the door, praying it wouldn't lead to their demise. A slight creak and then the door swung open, revealing a narrow tunnel, the air inside thick and stale. Without waiting for a response, he squeezed through, followed by Lily, then Ellen. Jake hesitated, looking back at the undulating darkness. "Come on," Mark urged, urgency wrapping around them like a noose. With a final glance at the cellar, Jake followed, and they stumbled into the tunnel. It was cramped, the walls sticky with time. Each breath filled Mark with the taste of decay. The growl had faded, but the unsettling feeling that something stalked them remained. Ellen moved closer, her shoulder brushing against Marcus' arm. "What if the shadow follows us?" she whispered, her voice laced with terror. "Then we deal with it," Mark replied, attempting to sound confident. Deep down, dread coiled tight within him. The tunnel twisted and turned, each bend concealing the unknown. Shadows danced in the flickering light of their dying phone screens, casting grim reflections on the walls. A sudden drop in temperature made them shiver, like icy hands were tracing their spines. Just then, a loud thud reverberated from behind them, the sound echoing down the tunnel like a warning bell. They all stopped, hearts racing as they exchanged panicked glances. "Did you hear that?" Jake gasped. "It came from the cellar," Lily said, her voice trembling with the slightest hint of disbelief. "What if it's free now?" Ellen's eyes widened, her breath hitching again. "We have to get out of here." "Keep moving," Mark commanded, desperate to regain some semblance of control. No stopping. The tunnel began to slope sharply upwards, and with every step, they felt their hope waning. The dim light cast a feeble glow, hinting at a potential escape just ahead. But as they quickened their pace, the scuttling sounds returned, louder this time, as if whatever was behind them had found its resolve. "Run!" Mark shouted, adrenaline overriding his fear. They bolted down the tunnel, the darkness stretching and clawing at their heels as the growl morphed into a chilling laughter, echoing through the narrow space. It rippled with anticipation, twisting the very fabric of their reality. At the final bend, they stumbled into another room, this one far more open yet saturated with an ominous quality. The walls were lined with old, cracked mirrors reflecting back their terrified faces. Each mirror seemed a doorway into another dark realm. "Where are we?" Ellen gasped. Before Mark could answer, a figure emerged in the mirror above them. Its eyes burned like coals, locking on Marcus' terrified gaze. He felt icy fingers claw at his chest, squeezing tight as if the figure reached out to him through the glass. "Mark!" Jake exclaimed, but the warning was drowned out by the figure's haunting laughter, now resonating within the strange space, echoing with sinister delight. "Get back!" Mark yelled, jaw clenched, backing away as the figure rippled with malevolence. As they scrambled for an escape, the mirrors began to crack, spreading like veins through the walls. Was it the cabin itself, alive and breathing? Each breath raced toward despair, and as the walls trembled, Mark realized they weren't merely fleeing the darkness. They were chasing something far more dangerous, a truth perhaps better left buried. What force pulled them into this nightmare? And would they discover the horrifying secret hidden within the mirrors before it consumed them whole? The cracks splintered and widened, jagged lines crawling up the mirrors like dark veins. Mark stumbled backward, his pulse pounding in his ears. The figure's laughter twisted into a mocking tune, each note laced with malice. Its eyes, those burning coals, shone with an unholy predatory hunger. "Mark!" Ellen cried again, but her voice sounded distant, muffled, as if the very air around them was thickening. "Over there," Lily shouted, pointing to a small opening at the far end of the room, barely illuminated by a ghostly glow. It looked like a passageway leading further into an abyss. "Let us move," Mark barked, shaking off the grip of dread that threatened to root him in place. They raced toward the opening, adrenaline surging through their veins, propelled by the desperate need to escape the horrors behind them. As they pushed through the aperture, the air turned colder, sharp and biting. It washed over them like a frigid wave, sharp enough to sting their lungs. The sound of their hurried footsteps echoed off the damp, stone walls, competing with the ominous laughter that grew fainter but never disappeared. Mark led the way, ducking through the narrow passage that seemed to twist like a serpent. With every turn, the flickering lights of their phones grew dimmer, the shadows deeper. Anxiety clawed at his throat, memories of what lay behind haunting him. They had to stay together. They could not be picked off one by one. Do you think it could come through? Jake huffed, glancing back, eyes wide with raw terror. Mark clenched his jaw. We have to go faster. Don't look back. But then the laughter returned, echoing down the passage with sinister glee. There was no way it could be far behind. Please, let us just find a way out, Ellen pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. They pressed on, the walls seeming to twist inward, tightening with each step until they reached a fork in the path. One way appeared endless and dark, while the other glimmered like a faint hope. Left or right? Mark asked, urgency hammering at the back of his mind. Right? Lily exclaimed, her eyes darting between the two options. Feels safer. Mark nodded, instincts flaring, and they veered right. But even as they moved, a chilling realization seeped in. The laughter was growing louder again, saturating the air like a creeping fog, surrounding them. Spurred by panic, they rushed down the right passage as the lights suddenly dimmed further and the ground began to shake. Felt alive, shifting underfoot. They stumbled, nearly losing their balance. Mark! Ellen screamed, clutching his arm as the vibrations intensified. It's the mirrors, he shouted, recognition dawning. They're connected to this place. Just then, a deafening crash echoed behind them. The passageway trembled violently, and Mark turned to see the walls beginning to close in. A jagged tear split the darkness as the figure burst through the last mirror behind them, its grin impossibly wide, eyes burning fiercely. Go! Go! Mark yelled, adrenaline pushing him forward even as fear paralyzed him in the face of the creature's gaze. They ran with a frenzy born from desperation, the sound of their footfalls swallowed whole by the dark. But as they dashed forward, they found themselves back in another room filled with mirrors, each one reflecting their panic-stricken faces, showing visions of terror unfolding in ways they could barely process. Stop! Jake shouted, panic thick in his voice. What does it want from us? I don't know. Mark gasped, heart racing, fighting against the thrumming dread. But we need to find out before it takes us. The laughter echoed once again, stronger now, shaking the very core of their souls. Mark stepped closer to the mirrors, compelled by forces beyond comprehension. What twisted truth stared back at him? Mark! No! Ellen cried, grasping for him, but it was too late. The glass shifted, absorbing him in a swirl of cold darkness. Mark! They shouted, but he was gone, pulled into the mirror's depths, leaving only questions and dread in its wake. Would they dare to rescue him? Or was this their own descent into madness? How could they escape a darkness that apparently relished in their despair? Behind them, only silence remained, a stagnant echo of what they had just lost. Time seemed suspended, and as they turned away from the mirror, they knew the worst was yet to come. They had stumbled upon something far beyond their understanding, and the game was only beginning. What awaited them within the depths of the mirrors? And would they find a way to navigate this living horror before it took everything they had? Ellen's breath hitched in her throat as the weight of Marcus' absence pressed down on her chest. The room pulsed with a sickening silence, and strange shadows danced across the mirrors, obscured by the faint glow from their phones. Think, Ellen, she whispered to herself, forcing her mind to work through the panic. They hadn't come this far just to lose him to whatever nightmare had taken him. Whereas Mark? Lily's voice trembled, brimming with helplessness. She stood rigid, eyes glued to the mirror where he had vanished, as if willing him to return. Stop staring, Jake snapped, urgency breaking through his fear. He is not coming back that way. He pointed toward the passage they had emerged from, darkness crawling beyond it as if waiting to snatch any who dared venture near. Where do we go? Ellen asked, feeling the cold trickle of despair seep through her veins. Maybe we need to go into the mirrors, Lily suggested hesitantly, biting her lip. What if there's a way to reach him? No way, Ellen shot back, shaking her head furiously. That's exactly what it wants, to lure us in. We have to find a way out. But the laughter a cruel, Echoing sound filled the room once again, reverberating off the walls and clawing at their sanity. It rolled through the mirrors, a taunt that rattled their every thought. They were trapped in a funhouse of horrors, and the walls felt closer than before as they backed away. The mirrors shifted, the reflections warping and twisting. Ellen caught glimpses of faces, her own visage contorted in agony. Was it her imagination? Or did the figures trapped inside reach out, mouths opening in silent screams? "Stand together," Jake shouted. They joined hands, forming a tight circle, but even that brought no comfort. The air turned oppressive, thickening as dread hung over them like a shroud. "How do we fight this?" Ellen shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. "We need to get Mark back." "Focus," Lily urged, her eyes scanning the mirrored reflections. "He wouldn't just leave us. There has to be a way." Suddenly, one of the mirrors flickered, images of Mark flashing briefly. He was standing there, looking lost. Fear gripped Ellen's heart. Was he really there? Or just another cruel trick? "Mark, can you hear me?" she screamed, tears stinging her eyes. The laughter escalated, the sound enveloping them like a monstrous wave. It vibrated through the space, knocking the wind out of her. The reflected Mark smiled, a cruel parody of joy. "Don't listen to it," Jake called out, pulling them away from the mirror. But the more they struggled, the harder the shadows pressed against them. "Help me," Mark's voice echoed, seeping like poison through the cracks, layering their despair. Ellen couldn't hold on anymore. She felt the call gnawing at her sanity. "I have to try. He needs me." She broke away, stumbling toward the nearest mirror, its surface still rippling with distorted images of Mark. The moment her fingertips brushed the glass, a cold shock jolted through her, felt like stepping into ice water. The sound of her friends calling for her faded, slurped away by the mirror's hungry grasp. For a fleeting moment, Ellen thought she saw the real Mark. He reached out, his face twisted with urgency. But then the reflection snapped back, transforming into an empty space as if mocking her every hope. "Ellen, no!" came a muffled shout behind her, just as the darkness threatened to close in around her. She caught sight of something glinting in the depths of the mirror, a shadow holding something bright and silver. Was it a way out? Or another trap designed to lure her in deeper? Heart racing, she dove in, desperate to uncover its secret. But the laughter erupted again, booming in a chaotic symphony of delight. "Ellen!" She heard Jake scream, the sound swallowed by the shadows as she plunged into the mirror. A sensation like falling enveloped her whole, knowing one crucial detail. In nightmares, the true terror lay in their unpredictable twists. What had she stepped into? Would she find Mark? Or was this the beginning of a far darker reality? And as the world around her dimmed, she barely caught a glimpse of the glimmering object disappearing into the depths. All she could feel was the relentless pull of the abyss. What awaited her in the shadows? Would her friends be next? Ellen felt her heart race as the darkness enveloped her, tumbling through a void where time lost meaning. She gasped for air that didn't exist, her hands reaching out instinctively. The icy surface of the mirror had transformed into a swirling abyss, the edges flickering like candlelight. A distant scream echoed, but it sounded muffled, as if she was deep underwater. No, this wasn't water. It was heavier, more suffocating. The laughter returned, taunting, clawing at her mind. It circled around her, whispering dark promises that made her skin crawl. Then she landed, not with a thud, but with an unsettling glide. Ellen found herself sprawled on the cold, hard ground of an unfamiliar room. The walls shimmered and pulsed like the skin of a living creature, flickering reflections of her own face staring back at her, each one a distorted mimic of her fear. "Mark," she rasped, her voice shaky and uncertain. The room was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the lights overhead. She pushed herself up slowly, regaining her footing. What had happened to her friends? Were they safe? Or had they ventured in after her? "Mark," she called again, hoping the sound would pull him back to her. The shadows shifted, as if responding, swirling together to form a shape in the corner. But it was not him. Just a flickering pull of darkness that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Panic clawed at her throat. She had to find him. She stood and began to move, each step a battle against the dread that made the air thick. The flickering mirrors reflected flashes of her past, the laughter, the road trip, the icy fear as they had stepped into this hellish place. Suddenly, a shrill voice cut through the tension. "You shouldn't have come here," it cackled, shooting through the silence like a knife. Ellen spun around. In the far corner stood a figure shrouded in shadows, features blurred but eyes glinting like shards of glass. "Who are you?" Ellen demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "Where's Mark?" The figure leaned in closer, revealing a smile that stretched too wide, revealing sharp teeth. "He's where he belongs. And soon you will join him." The laughter rose again, echoing against the walls and rattling her bones. A horrible realization settled over her. "Is this a game?" she cried, glancing at the mirrors lining the walls. Hundreds of her own reflections stared back, faces twisted in horror and despair. "Not a game, dear," the figure replied, its voice oozing with malice. "This is your destiny. Each door leads to another truth. Every reflection is a choice." Ellen's head spun. She stepped back, fighting the urge to scream. The world around her spun, distorting reality until she saw flashes the friends she had left behind, their faces morphing into grotesque versions of themselves, trapped in their own nightmarish reflections. "Help! Get us out!" she heard Jake's voice pleading. It came from a mirror to her left. She rushed toward it, banging her palms against the cool surface. "Let them go!" she cried, her voice breaking. The shadows writhed, making it impossible to see much more than fragmented images. For a moment, she thought she saw Jake's desperate eyes, wide with terror. "Ellen!" His voice faded as the figure behind her chuckled darkly. "Choose wisely," it hissed. "The price of escape is steep. Once you enter a mirror, there's no guarantee you'll return." Ellen felt her breath quicken. Which mirror held the answer? Each one shone with possibilities, each tempting her with a glimpse of her friends. But the image never stayed clear long enough for her to decide. "Mark needs me," she whispered, desperation flooding her veins. But the laughter washed over her once more, drowning out reason, pulling her deeper into fierce embrace. The shadows crept closer, curling around her legs as if claiming her for their own. Then, something caught her eye. A mirror stood apart from the others, shimmering with an inviting glow, calling to her more than the rest. What if, just maybe, this one held the key to finding Mark? With a racing heart, Ellen made her choice. Without thinking, she darted toward that mirror. But as she reached out, she hesitated, realization striking. What if this was no escape at all but the final trap? Could she take that leap? In that fleeting moment of doubt, she felt the darkness closing in. Shadows clung to her, whispering sweet lies. "Join us forever." As her hands stretched forth, she heard the echoes of her friends fade into silence. What lay behind this new mirror? Would it finally lead her to Mark, or seal her fate? The air crackled with tension as she stood on the precipice, heart pounding, waiting for a revelation that may never come. Ellen stood frozen before the shimmering mirror, the weight of her choice heavy in the air. Her heart raced as whispers wrapped around her, dark and insistent, pulling at her sanity. This mirror glowed with a hypnotic allure, beckoning her deeper into its depths. "Mark!" she shouted, desperation tearing through her. Her reflection twisted, shadows writhing, teasing memories of her family. But she couldn't dwell on them now. She could sense the ticking clock of fate, with darkness creeping closer, eager to claim her. Time was running thin. Whatever horrors lay within those mirrors, she had to take the leap. With resolve and trembling fingers, she touched the surface. The moment her skin met the glass, a shock coursed through her, freezing the world solid. Ellen gasped as she was pulled through the mirror, bursting into another reality. She landed hard on cold, splintered wood, struggling to catch her breath in the heavy silence. Ellen pushed herself up, her heart pounding in her chest. The stench of damp, Rotting leaves filled the air. She was outside, amidst the tangled remains of twisted trees and fog. But where was Mark? Mark, she cried, voice echoing in the stillness. As if responding to her call, shadows began to coalesce in the distance. Ellen felt pulse of trepidation gnaw at her resolve. She stumbled forward, stepping through the dense underbrush, and as she approached a clearing, her breath caught. Before her loomed a giant, decrepit mirror framed by twisted branches. As familiar as it was foreboding, suddenly, echoes of laughter erupted, chilling her bones. Around the mirror, lost souls' familiar faces twisted in agony. Their eyes pleading screamed silently, trapped behind the glass. Among them, she recognized Mark, his face pale and distorted, reaching out as if to escape. "Ellen!" he shouted, his voice splintered by fear as the shadows began swirling around them. "Help! No!" Ellen screamed, panic surging as she rushed toward the mirror. "I will save you." She clawed at the surface, but it pulsed, rejecting her grasp. The figure at the back, cloaked in shadows, cackled. "You think you can save him? Every choice has a consequence. Please," she shouted, her determination hardening. "Let us go." Mark's reflection twisted, tears pooling in those desperate eyes. "Fight! We need to fight!" he yelled, the urgency in his tone igniting a spark within her. Combining their wills, they let the connection grow, pouring everything into the moment, the love, the bonds that tethered them even in darkness. Realization ignited within Ellen. This wasn't just a mirror. It was a barrier built from their fears and regrets. "Mark," she cried, reaching deep within herself. "We find our way together." The laughter shrieked, a godless wail as she slammed her palms onto the glass, focusing her intent. The shadows around them erupted in chaos, swirling dangerously, but with their unified strength, the mirror began to crack. The cracking spread like wildfire, echoes of their shared past resonating through the fractures. With one final push, Ellen drove her hands through the splintering surface, feeling the cold glass give way. "Now!" she shouted, drawing on every last scrap of strength that in one powerful surge. Mark dove through the crumbling shards, crashing into her and tumbling backward. They hit the ground, gasping as a wave of light enveloped them, washing the shadows away. Distant cries of rage erupted from the collapsing mirror, but Ellen held Mark tightly, feeling his warmth return as reality reasserted itself around them. The cabin, the dark woods, melted back together. "Did we?" Mark gasped, looking around, disbelief painted across his features. "Together," Ellen whispered, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks. "Thank God." Lily rushed forward, pulling both of them into a fierce embrace, Jake close behind. But their joy was short-lived. The cabin's walls trembled, shadows flickering ominously. They could still hear distant whispers, threats echoing through the air. "Let us go," Mark urged, leading them toward the door. They burst into the warmth of the outside world, the moonlight flooding the area as the darkness clawed behind them. "We need to keep moving," Ellen urged. The family sprinted away, the haunted cabin receding into the distance, but the echoes of that night etched in their hearts forever. A promise hung in the air. They had conquered the darkness for now, but they would always remain vigilant as dawn broke over the horizon. Painted in hues of hope, they stepped into a new day, together. And in the shadows, whispers faded, for the darkness knew it had not yet seen the last of them. "Now, I can't believe you made it this far. This is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you never miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Don't wait even one more second to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And if you haven't shared this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, do it right now. You need to support the channel.